Welcome back to the Potter Alarms. The incredible Portsmouth Raids of December 1774 is the next major confrontation with the British that we will look at. By this time, political unrest was beginning to build, and independence from Great Britain was on the mind of many in the New England colonies. And the American rebels were beginning to organize, politically and militarily. Many towns had formed Minutemen detachments in their own town militias, and they were ready to act on a minute's notice. Although most men in the militia owned their own firearm, there was one thing they were seriously short of: gunpowder.
At this time in history, not one American gunpowder manufacturer existed in America. All gunpowder had to be imported into the colonies from the outside, usually from Great Britain. Given the growing population unrest and the potential rebellion looming, Gage needed to act.
Early in December of 1774, Parliament ordered to prohibit the export of arms and gunpowder into North America. So, the only way that Patriot militias were going to secure supplies of powder was to steal it from the British. And General Gage knew this. So he ordered that all efforts be made to secure all remaining military stores of gunpowder, muskets, and cannons in the entire colonies. He then ordered that all of it be transported into fortified Boston, thus denying the rebels the means to conduct a rebellion.
Of particular risk was a large supply of British military gunpowder, cannon, and muskets, located at a British fort guarding the entrance to the harbor at Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Fort William and Mary. And it was only guarded by a very small force of British sentries. On December 12, 1774, intelligence received by Paul Revere through the Patriots spy network in Boston indicated that a major British operation was imminent by sea and land to secure the powder and cannon stores at Fort William and Mary.
On the orders of Dr. Joseph Warren, the leader of the Boston rebel movement, Paul Revere immediately set out for Portsmouth to sound the alarm. He rode from Boston to Portsmouth under a particularly cold and snowy December night to notify the local Portsmouth area Patriot leaders of the impending British operation. He rode along the Old Bay Road, what is now Massachusetts Route 1A. That road still exists, and it's an incredible motorcycle ride up through the historic North Shore communities of northeast Massachusetts into southern New Hampshire. Upon arrival, Revere told the Patriot leaders that 2 regiments of regulars were coming to seize the powder at Fort William and Mary, and a Royal Naval frigate was en route with additional troops. Knowing that the abundant gunpowder supply at the fort was the only source of gunpowder for the local militia in the entire region, the Portsmouth militia leaders acted quickly on the news that Revere had brought them. They had to seize it before the British troops arrived from Boston, and they needed to act fast. By noon of December 14, 1774, over 400 militia members had mustered for duty in Portsmouth. And it was not only the Portsmouth militia that provided troops for the raid. Exeter and Durham, New Hampshire also provided a number of men during this operation. They collected a number of small boats and began moving towards the fort in preparation for the assault. Their mission? To confiscate the massive amount of gunpowder located at the fort. By 3 p.m., the attack began under the cover of a snowstorm. The militia force was broken into 2 detachments. One would attack the fort from land with a frontal assault, and the second would use the boats and attack the fort from the water side, from behind. However, as both militia detachments approached the fort, The British sentries saw them coming through the snow and broadcast the alarm. As they approached the front gate of the fort, the militia leader of the land assault detachment shouted out a demand for the British to surrender the fort. In defiance, the British garrison hoisted the Union Jack and managed to fire off several cannon volleys towards them before the New Hampshire men swarmed all over the walls from every side. Outnumbered 400 to 6, the British military commander of the fort, a Captain Cochrane, made the prudent decision to surrender the fort. He presented his sword to the Patriot commander in surrender, but was allowed to keep it. To the horror of Cochrane and the British prisoners, the King's colors were hauled down the flagpole and disrespected by the New Hampshire militia. When Cochrane saw this, he was compelled to draw his sword to defend the colors, but was immediately restrained, hit over the head, and wounded by the militia. Meanwhile, another British soldier tried to stop them, but he too was clubbed by the end of a pistol by another militiaman. These were truly the first blows and the first British blood drawn of the American Revolution, 4 months before the events at Lexington and Concord. After the fort was secured, the real work began in earnest. The militiamen broke open the magazine and carried away more than 100 barrels of gunpowder. And then, using carts and some of the boats they arrived in, moved the precious cargo initially to the towns of Durham and Exeter, New Hampshire. There it was split into many smaller loads and then moved again to many other hiding places in the southeastern New Hampshire countryside. As the raid was taking place, the word got out to the other towns in the surrounding area, and by the next morning, more than 1,000 men marched on Portsmouth. By midday, they returned to the fort and took away a large haul of muskets and 16 cannons, leaving about 20 heavy pieces behind because they had nothing to move them with. The British finally did respond by sending ships carrying troops to Portsmouth, but they arrived too late, arriving 3 days after the fort's supplies were removed. The first frigate, the HMS Canso, arrived on December 17th and was purposely directed into the shallows at high tide by a local Patriot pilot, much to the captain's anger. The second frigate, HMS Scarborough, did not arrive in Portsmouth until a week after the raids had taken place. By then, the New Hampshire militia had released the British prisoners and melted away into the countryside. The British commander had come ashore facing a very angry royal governor, a defeated garrison, a looted fort, and a hostile population. For General Gage, the Portsmouth alarm and raid was a huge defeat. Not only was the garrison defeated, the fort taken, and the gunpowder and arms seized by the Patriots, but the people of New Hampshire had been provoked into committing an overt act of armed rebellion, exactly the thing that he was trying to prevent. The British had been humiliated again and again, and their anger and frustration levels were skyrocketing, and their patience was wearing thin. Many British commanders vowed that the next time things would be different.
Today, the fort still stands, but after the Revolutionary War had been won, it was renamed Fort Constitution.
Today, there is a commemorative plaque affixed to the wall next to the entrance of the fort, and a nearby roadside marker that describes what happened here between December 14th and 15th of 1774. So, go check it out. It's an incredible ride if you follow Route 1A up the coastal road into Portsmouth, and then over to Fort Constitution. Here's a few maps on how to get there. Again, using Faneuil Hall in downtown Boston as a reference point, work your way out of the city towards Salem, Massachusetts. And from there, get onto Route 1A northwards towards Ipswich, Massachusetts. This is the historic Old Bay Road. And the road you will be following is the same route Paul Revere followed on December 12th of 1774. Continue your ride along Route 1A north up to and through Newburyport, Massachusetts. Then cross over into southern New Hampshire, riding through the towns of Seabrook and Hampton Beach. Continue following Route 1A north along the majestic coastal road into downtown Portsmouth. Work your way into historic downtown Portsmouth. The center of the city retains its colonial period vibe, and many colonial structures still remain. In fact, Continental Navy Captain John Paul Jones's house is still standing and open for tours. Downtown Portsmouth is really an awesome spot to visit, so make sure to stop and check it out. When ready, continue to work your way east along the very scenic Route 1B towards Newcastle, New Hampshire, where the fort is located. Check out the U.S. Navy base on the opposite side of the river and grab a glimpse of the old U.S. Navy brig, or jail. Although closed now, it is an incredible historic building in its own right. Be advised that, as you approach the fort, you will see signs for the U.S. Coast Guard Station at Portsmouth, an active-duty Coast Guard rescue station. The fort is actually located on the grounds of the Coast Guard Station. You will be able to enter the active-duty base to the fort, so don't be intimidated by the Coast Guard security gate when you arrive. You will be allowed to visit the fort as long as you stay on those blue lines. Although the fort was modernized during the War of 1812, it is still historic and is in great shape, so go and check it out. As you have seen, several rebellious events had taken place by December of 1774. The British were being humiliated at every turn, and their frustration and anger was building. Colonial militia actions and successes were leading to a patriot belief that they could handle anything that the British military could throw at them, and an overconfidence was building. They felt they couldn't be touched. By February 1775, another confrontation would take place in Salem, Massachusetts. What happened there? Find out when you come back and see what happens at Salem when you check out Part 6 of The Powder Alarms. If you've liked watching this episode of The Powder Alarms, please hit like or subscribe so you can keep up with new episodes as they become available. And lastly, please share this channel with your friends. Thanks for watching.